Hey everyone, welcome back to Branded. Today we are talking about something that every single business owner feels at one point or another, that feeling of being behind. Like, oh, my business should be further along by now, et cetera, right? The list goes on. That feeling of being behind, most of us, the problem is, okay, let's start here. The problem is, most of us are comparing our chapter one to someone else's chapter 10. And if you've been in any kind of business coaching settings, you have probably heard this before, right? Like, stop comparing your chapter one to someone else's chapter 10. It's so true, though. And quite honestly, we forget it. I forgot it for a hot minute and found myself in comparison, and I'm spiraling, and I'm like, this sucks. Why am I feeling this way? Well, when we see these really polished brands, and there's years, literally years of context behind that brand. And we forget that they probably had a messy middle also, right? They had a half-built offer that maybe they launched and it flopped. They were not quite as shiny as they are now. We forget these things. But this is the thing, right? You're not behind. Just because you see this perfectly polished brand with incredible offers, a great website, systems that seem to just flow effortlessly because you've opted into their stuff and you're like, holy shit, this is like amazing. How can I make this happen for my own business? That doesn't mean that you're behind. That simply means that it's time for you to start building with a little bit of a blueprint. So today we're going to kind of create one. That's sort of the purpose of today's episode, is to dive into how simple creating a blueprint for your business can be when you recognize the hidden phases of your own brand's growth. Comparison can be brutal, like 100%. I have found myself in the scroll hole more times than I like to admit, comparing my business to these polished brands. So you can sit across from, like, let's say I'm sitting across from a client and she's running a thriving business, but she's whispering to me like, gosh, I still feel like I should be further along. Okay, yeah, we all feel that way at one point or another, but it's usually because of that really, really nasty thing such as comparison. And social media does not make it easy because it is quite literally being shoved in our faces 100% of the time, which is why I find myself not scrolling social quite as much these days, because it helps me not to fall into that comparison trap. Because I remember whenever I first started Social Jane, y'all, I was scrolling Instagram late at night all the time. I was on my phone constantly whenever I first started my business because I thought I had to be. I thought that if I wasn't on my phone, that I was going to be missing out on some little piece of business that would come across my screen and I wouldn't catch it. That's not how it works. When you're looking at these brands, sorry for the long pause, drama. When you're looking at these really polished brands and you're sitting there thinking, like, this feels so effortless for them. If only I had this part of my business together. If only I had my website done. If only I was doing email marketing. If only I had systems that would help me not send manual emails every time someone signed up for something. If only. Well, guess what? Your business is already legitimate without all of those things. And eventually, your business will have those things if you keep moving through the phases of growth that your business is inevitably going to hit. Trust me, every business hits these phases. And looking at someone's chapter 10 when it's super polished and shiny and looks fucking phenomenal, they had the messy bits too. You just don't see them anymore. And people don't talk about them quite so much, right? They want to talk about the glitzy things and all the shit that's working and, all of that kind of stuff. But this podcast is about how to run a business with real conversations. I'm not trying to just give you glossy stuff. So, what you're not seeing on all of those like curated Instagram feeds is 10 years of someone trial and erroring an offer, all of the pivots that they had to make. Maybe their brand name used to be something entirely different than what it is today. All those late nights that I'm sure that person put into getting to the point of having a super curated Instagram feed, having a really beautiful website, having backend systems that are working while they're sleeping. Those things take effort and take time. They don't just happen overnight. And so when you're sitting there comparing yourself saying, God, I wish I was just further along, how about appreciate the phase that you're in, give your full attention to the phase that you're in, and move through it? Because you will inevitably continue through all these phases. And before you know it, you're one of those polished brands that someone else is looking at going, gosh, I wish I was further along. I wish I was like them. Grass is always greener, right? The whole scenario. And this is where that problem lies, is that most business owners, they just skip these steps. They skip all of these sort of hidden phases of their brand's growth because they want to be established, right? They want to have that like look and feel of a decade's worth of work while they're still in the building phase. Now, I'm not saying you can't look polished and put together while you're in the building phase. You absolutely can, but to a degree. You don't need to know everything right now because your brand, it's not growing in a straight line, right? It's not linear. It is going to have lots of ups and downs. Being a business owner is not for the faint of heart. And your brand is going to grow in these phases. And once you understand and accept the fact that your brand is going through these sort of, I call them hidden phases because we don't really see them and we mostly skip over them because we want to be further along than we are. But once you really understand and accept that you are actually going through these phases of your brand's growth, you can stop beating yourself up and you can actually start playing the game for the phase that you're in right now. Like, how powerful would that be if you were actually doing the work that was aligned with the version of your business that is happening right now? So here's how we can kind of break it down. This is the blueprint part. And if you're not driving, feel free to take notes. Either way, it's going to be in the show notes so you can access it. Phase one is always going to be the experimental phase. This is, let's call this like the messy middle, okay? This is where you're testing your offers, you're finding out who you really want to be in your business, who do you really want to be serving and working with. And honestly, during this phase, you're going to make a lot of wrong turns. But your job at this phase is not to be super duper polished and put together. It really is to just collect data, to start to create this sort of database of knowledge that you can then move forward into the next phase with, right? So this experimental stage, this messy middle where you're like, okay, I have an offer, I'm going to put it out there, I'm going to test it. If it flops, you pivot. If it explodes and you have nothing on the back end, guess what? You pivot. You have work to do, right? There's always a pivot and some work to be done based on the outcome at hand. None of these outcomes are bad. They all will lead to the next right thing. So phase two is going to be that sort of defining stage of your brand. This is where you start refining all the things that are working and aren't working. So in phase one, where you're collecting all the data, you're rolling out some offers, you're seeing what lands, what doesn't, you're making some mistakes, you're fixing them, right? That next phase, you're going to start refining all of that because you're learning from it. So you've got proof that, let's say, your offer works. You've got the data to prove it. You know who your client is a little bit better because you've got the data to show who's buying, who's sticking around. And so now you can begin to clarify your message and your offers and your systems to align with the person who's buying. And then phase three is your expansion stage. At this point, you're not just reacting to what's happening, right? You're actually building something intentionally because you've got the data and the proof to back it up. So your brand becomes strong enough to be scalable. Your systems are there to support the growth that you know is on its way to you or is already happening. So this is when being a little more polished makes some sense because you're creating a foundation that can hold that. If you're in phase one, right? If you're in that sort of experimental stage of your business where you're kind of testing your offers, you're not quite sure who your ideal client just is yet, you're not really sure how to say it just yet, right? If you're in that phase one, but you're expecting your business to look like phase three, where it's fully polished, has a foundation, has systems in place, and you 100% are behind your offer and know who you're serving, if you're in phase one and you're expecting to look like phase three, you're going to feel behind because you're setting this expectation up for failure, essentially. Own the phase that you're in. You've got to go through all of them, right? Before you walk, you run, or before you run, you walk. That's how that goes. Before you run, you walk, right? We all had to learn how to do life in these bite-sized pieces. Your brand is not any different. Just because AI makes you think that things happen just like that, information is one thing, action is another. So here's what this could kind of look like in real life, right? We're going to stop sprinting for someone else's timeline, by the way. We're going to start focusing on what matters right now. That's what this episode is about. Focus on the right now because that's where you can make the most impact in your brand. So here's what this could look like. You're in phase one of your brand, right? You're still experimenting with your offers and who your client is and all of those things, but you're constantly comparing yourself to a mentor you've had who's been in business for, let's say, 12 years. That's a long time. Like, that's a big gap to be comparing yourself to somebody, right? Yeah, you might have a strong offer and you have some clients that are loving you, but you're constantly telling people, like, oh, my website's just not put together the way I want it to be, and I need a total rebrand. Hold up. Before we do that, zoom out because your brand isn't broken and doesn't need all of this like huge overhaul. It's not even finished yet. So what are you overhauling, right? You're supposed to be experimenting. You're supposed to be not perfect. And once you realize that, okay, I am in the experimental phase, maybe I can play rather than putting all this pressure on myself, your energy shifts. You stop forcing the whole, like, I'm going to be polished, and you start focusing on collecting the feedback that's going to shape the defining stage. Like, how different of an approach is that? You know, when you see it from that angle and you give yourself permission to completely put the comparison and the stress aside and say, you know what, I am in the experimental stage and things might be a little fucking messy right now. But guess what? I'm still going to show up. I'm still going to collect the data and the information that I need in order to move my business forward into the next phase that I know that it's ready for. Here's what I want you to walk away with from today. That phase one, that experimental phase, focus on clarity in your offers, what you sell and who it's for. That would be the thing I would focus on the most in that experimental phase because, I mean, you're in business, right? You want to be making money with your business. Focus on the offer. How are you going to present this to people? How are you going to price it? What's the thing that you're going to be offering? What does it include? What does it not include? And who is it for? That's what I would be doing in phase one. Phase two, I would focus on clarifying the message behind that offer. How do you want to say this to people? How do you want people to absorb this information? So focus on clarity of your message, meaning how do you talk about what it is that you do? Because you don't want to be fumbling through like, oh, I do this and sometimes I do this and every now and then I do this. Get clear on it, right? What is it that you're doing, that you're selling? Who is it for? And how are you going to convey that message to them so they hear it loud and clear? That's what I would do in phase two, clarity of message. Phase three, I would focus on clarity of systems. This is the part that gets skipped. But if you want a polished brand, this is 150% part of it. Clarity of systems. This is about how does your business actually run behind the scenes, the parts that nobody sees. So first we're looking at your offers, right? Then we're looking at your messaging, and then we're looking at the parts nobody's looking at because it's the foundational piece. It's the part that's going to keep the wheels turning so you can keep selling offers without burning yourself out. You can keep refining your message of those offers without burning yourself out. So that's what I would focus on in phase three is clarity of systems. And I have a couple clients right now that are in that phase of their business, and it is so cool to see this like light switch moment go off for them where they recognize how much their business has needed this because they've only been focusing on the parts that everybody sees, which is easy to do with social media, right? You expect, okay, well, I got to focus on the parts that people see. You have to focus on the parts people don't see just as much. And this sort of blueprint, I guess we can say, these three phases, it's not about getting through them as quickly as you can and just rushing through it. It's about honoring the work that needs to be done at each of these phases. Because once you do, you don't need to go back, right? You can get that clarity of what your offer really is. And until you decide, I don't want to do this work anymore, that offer is crystal clear. It's aligned with you. You have the data to prove that people love it and they're going to keep buying it. That's golden. Check, right? You don't have to come back to this work quite so frequently if you actually give it the attention that it needs when it is in front of you. So if you've been feeling like, oh, I'm a little behind in my business, the ugly, ugly comparison trap, it's pretty likely that you're not behind at all. Maybe you're right on time for exactly the phase you need to be in right now. What if you saw it that way? What if you gave it that attention with that level of energy? How different would that be when you approach your work today? So if today's conversation hit home for you, share this with like a biz bestie or somebody who might be stuck in that like comparison trap. They're constantly, every time you talk to them, they're like, God, I'm so behind. I need to do this and I need to do this and I need to do this. I get it. My brain is going a million miles an hour sometimes, but I have to stop myself and intentionally bring myself back to the awareness of what can I do right now for my business right now that is going to move the needle forward so I don't have to come back to this. Because that's where you get stuck in this really vicious loop of like constantly feeling so busy but not getting anything done at the same time is because you're not giving the full attention to the task at hand. You're stretching yourself too thin. I'm a freaking master at stretching myself too thin. That's not a good thing. Trying to be better about it. But that's why I do these episodes because I need these reminders in my own business too. It does not matter if you are in chapter 1 of your business or if you are in chapter 10 of your business. We all go through these things and we all need these moments of realization that we really have the power to control how our business moves forward and what it achieves and becomes. Just give it the attention it needs in this moment right now. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Hidden phases of brand growth. I mean, they're there. I mean, they're hidden, but they're not really hidden. We just ignore them. But I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. I'll see you next week for a brand new one. Bye, y'all.
Thank you so much for listening to Branded, the podcast. Please rate and review. And for more information, visit socialjanemedia.com.